Before you dive into this story, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine a man so brilliant, so dangerously cunning, that he fooled the FBI, judges, psychiatrists, journalists, criminals, politicians, and even his own enemies for more than 30 years. Imagine a man who walked the streets of New York in a bathrobe, mumbling nonsense, appearing weak, lost, fragile, while secretly commanding one of the most powerful crime empires in American history. A man who outsmarted the smartest, deceived the most powerful, and controlled billions from behind the mask of madness. But the most shocking part isn't how he rose, it's how he fell. Not by bullets, not by betrayal, not by the FBI, but by a decision only a father could make. This is the true and haunting tale of Vincent the Chin Gigante, perhaps the greatest criminal illusionist the world has ever known. Listen closely. Every detail matters. In the labyrinthine bowels of New York City, that sleepless metropolis where the threads of obscene wealth are inextricably woven into the shadowed tapestry of crime, and where skyscrapers are erected upon foundations of corruption and blood, one of the most complex human sagas in American history was written. It was a saga not headlined by a president or a general, but by a man who realized, through a Machiavellian instinct, that survival in a world of wolves requires one not merely to be the strongest, but the smartest, the most cunning, and the most capable of wearing a mask. Vincent Gigante was the living embodiment of this philosophy, the man who penned an unwritten constitution for organized crime. Kill silently, slaughter quietly, befriend the police, stab the judiciary, unite the mafia, but eliminate the loose lips first, and always remember to see America through Italian eyes. These were not merely hollow slogans chanted in secret initiations. They were the rigid dogma and lifeblood of a man who managed to deceive the world's most powerful law enforcement agency for 30 years. He convinced the world he was a madman wandering the streets in pajamas, while in reality, he was the puppet master of a colossal economic and criminal empire that infiltrated every joint of the state, a titan who only fell when he chose to sacrifice everything, his legend, his genius, and his freedom, to save his own flesh and blood in a finale befitting the greatest of Greek tragedies. The tale begins at the bottom, in the grimy alleys of Greenwich Village, Manhattan, in the late 1920s. Specifically, in 1928, Vincent Louis Gigante was born to immigrant parents from Naples who carried their dreams and disappointments to the land of opportunity. At that time, the neighborhood was an insular Italian enclave, reeking of slow-cooked Sicilian sauce, mixed with the stench of poverty and oppression. In this suffocating climate, Vincent grew up fatherless after death claimed his patriarch when the boy was merely 5, leaving his mother alone to face the ferocious waves of life, striving desperately to shield her brood from the fatal allure of the street. Yet that street was teeming with two distinct breeds of men: the crushing labor class who toiled day and night for crumbs, and the men of Cosa Nostra, strutting in silk suits, driving gleaming cars, and smoking Cuban cigars, walking the earth like uncrowned kings who dispensed their own brand of justice and protected their own from the bigotry of outsiders. It was inevitable that a child with piercing eyes and a sharp mind would notice this stark contrast, cementing a conviction in his soul that power was the only currency recognized in this cruel world. In his teenage years, while his peers played, Vincent haunted the back rooms of cafes and dive bars that served as the offices for mobsters. He watched them in silence, memorizing their movements and studying the language of their bodies. He caught their eye with his razor-sharp intelligence, particularly in gambling and rapid calculation, often outsmarting men twice his age. It seemed his path to the underworld was preordained, yet the strapping young man decided in a moment of clarity to attempt a different route, a path that might offer glory and gold without staining his hands with blood. He turned to boxing, that brutal sport which served as a life raft for the poor of forgotten neighborhoods. Because he was underage, he resorted to his first act of deception, forging documents and fighting under his older brother's name. He stormed the ring like a raging bull, fighting 25 bouts that were battles of life and death. He emerged victorious in 21 of them, crushing his opponents by knockout in 18. The sports pages began to whisper of a coming champion, a hero who might change the odds, driving him to rent a house far away in a quiet neighborhood, dreaming of a clean life and a bright future far from the Mafia's swamp. But the Mafia is like an octopus. It does not easily release prey once it has fixed its gaze upon it. In 1927, while Vincent was training alone in a gym, dripping with sweat and dreams, the door swung open to reveal 3 men with stone faces and formal suits. He knew them immediately. They were the messengers of the family. They asked him to step outside, and in the plush black sedan waiting at the curb, Vincent was placed before the test that would reshape his destiny. They offered him a fortune, equal to what he might earn in years of boxing, for a single task: to discipline a small restaurant owner who refused to pay protection money. When the young boxer tried to cling to his pride and refuse, the tone shifted from seduction to explicit terror. They threatened his mother living alone and his athletic future, hinting at an accidental break of his hand or leg. Under this dual threat, Vincent crumbled. He executed the mission, dipping his first hand into the world of violence. They didn't stop there. They followed him into the ring, fixing a match and betting heavily against him, then delivering the order, "You must lose tonight." That night, Vincent fell to the canvas feigning defeat, but the man who truly died was the honorable boxer, and rising in his place was the ruthless gangster. He was spotted by the eyes of Vito Genovese, one of the fiercest and most cunning mafia bosses, who was secretly plotting to seize the ultimate throne. Genovese saw in Vincent a long-term investment, a young, strong, obedient man who didn't ask questions. He decided to adopt him and mold him. He trained him in the arts of silence and how to read the subtext of words, making Vincent his inseparable shadow. The grand plan Genovese was concocting was the removal of Frank Costello, the legendary boss known as the Prime Minister for his political connections. On a rainy night in May 1957, 0 hour arrived. Vincent lay in wait for Costello in the lobby of his luxury apartment building. He waited with the patience of a professional hunter, and when Costello appeared, Vincent emerged from the shadows, shouting a phrase that would be immortalized in crime history: "This is for you, Frank." He pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the boss's head and he fell, bathed in blood. Vincent assumed Costello was finished, but a miracle occurred. The bullet traveled around the skull beneath the skin without penetrating the brain. Costello survived. Vincent thought his life was over due to the botched hit, but at the courtroom, he received a new lesson in Mafia dynamics. When the judge asked the victim to identify the shooter, the old Don looked directly into Vincent's eyes and said coldly, "I didn't see anything. I don't know who shot me." It was the absolute application of omerta. Costello understood the message and chose safety, abdicating the leadership to Genovese and retiring quietly, leaving Vincent to become the second in command of the most powerful criminal organization in America. The wheels of time turned, and Genovese died in prison in 1969, leaving Vincent to sit on the throne as the boss of the Genovese family, the most powerful of the 5 families of New York. But he was a boss of a different breed, one who had read history well and realized that ego and fame were the graveyards of all previous dons. He decided to devise a new method for rule and survival, one based on total strategic deception. Thus, the character of the madman was born. Vincent began a meticulously staged performance that lasted for decades. He would emerge from his home at random hours, wearing a bathrobe and slippers, his hair disheveled, muttering incomprehensible words that blended religious prayers with vulgar obscenities. He would stand before parking meters, arguing with them for hours, and even went so far as to urinate in the streets in front of passersby, cementing in the minds of the public and the police that this was a man who had completely lost his mind. He didn't stop at acting. He employed an army of lawyers and psychiatrists, some bribed, others genuinely fooled by his performance, to secure official medical reports from courts confirming he suffered from advanced schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, and dementia, granting him a legal immunity that rendered him mentally unfit to stand trial. While the world mocked this senile old man, Vincent was operating from behind the curtain, often from a modest social club in the village, managing a financial and criminal empire upon which the sun never set. He instituted strict laws the Mafia had never known. He issued a decree forbidding the utterance of his name entirely. The penalty for violation was immediate death. His followers devised a silent signal, stroking their chin when referring to him, earning him the nickname, the Chin. He shifted the Mafia's compass from traditional exposed crimes like direct drug trafficking and robbery to clean, masked crimes. He seized control of labor unions, construction companies, concrete supplies, garbage collection, and the fish market. At one point, not a single window was installed in a New York skyscraper without Vincent getting a cut. The family's wealth ballooned obscenely, infiltrating the legitimate economy. To maintain this cleanliness, he used mercenaries and Asian gangs to carry out assassinations and wet work when necessary, keeping the family ledger spotless before the authorities and keeping his own hands far from direct blood. In the midst of this silent success and absolute control, a new threat appeared on the horizon, not from the police, but from within the Mafia itself. It came in the form of John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino family, who was the polar opposite of Vincent. Gotti loved the spotlight, wore bespoke Italian suits, appeared on magazine covers, gave quotes to reporters, and acted like a movie star, making him a perpetual target for the FBI and a source of anxiety for the other families who preferred the shadows. Initially, Vincent tried to eliminate Gotti, sending a team to assassinate him, but the car bomb only killed Gotti's underboss, leaving the Teflon Don alive. It seemed an all-out war was about to erupt, a war that would leave corpses littering the streets of New York. But Vincent, with his customary cunning, realized that open warfare would bring destruction to everyone and invite crushing government intervention. He arranged a top-secret meeting with Gotti. In a dark basement, far from prying eyes, the two foxes agreed on a brilliant scenario. Gotti would continue his noise and public appearances to serve as a lightning rod, drawing all the efforts and resources of the FBI, while Vincent continued his role as the madman to work in total quiet. They agreed to feign public hostility to mislead investigators. The plan succeeded for years, as the FBI obsessed over chasing the dapper Don, ignoring the crazy Don. However, the wind does not always blow as the ships desire. In the early 90s, the House of Cards began to tremble. Sammy the Bull Gravano, John Gotti's right-hand man, was arrested and faced life imprisonment. Because loyalty in the underworld is a rare currency, Sammy decided to sell everyone to save his own skin. He stood before cameras and in court to deliver confessions that shook the United States. He pulled back the curtain and said verbatim, "You are chasing ghosts. Vincent Gigante is not crazy. He is the smartest man in the Mafia. He is the actual boss of all the 5 families, and his insanity is just a mask." It was a shock to the investigators, who felt they had been subjected to the greatest deception in their history. But Vincent did not surrender. He increased the dosage of his performance. He hid hallucinogenic and sedative pills in the cavity of one of his teeth. Before any medical exam or hearing, he would pierce the casing with his tongue and swallow the drug, causing his heart rate to spike, his eyes to glaze over, and his sweat to pour, inducing hysterical behaviors that convinced doctors he was suffering a genuine psychotic episode, making his conviction legally nearly impossible. The FBI decided to change their strategy. Instead of searching for traditional physical evidence, they launched a psychological war. They began leaking jokes and rumors in the criminal underworld, portraying Vincent as a laughingstock, a senile old man wetting himself, aiming to shake his prestige among his soldiers. Simultaneously, they planted state-of-the-art surveillance devices and long-range cameras to watch him around the clock. Over years of close surveillance, they caught only 2 fatal slips. The first was when Vincent forgot his role for a split second and greeted an old friend passing in a car with a confident baritone voice before reverting to mumbling. The second was when he leaped with the agility and speed of a young athlete to avoid a speeding car that nearly ran him over, reflexes incompatible with a sick old man. These tiny cracks were the thin thread the investigators grasped. In 1997, forces moved in and arrested him at his home. He was led to prison, and despite a sentence of 12 years, Vincent refused to break character. He continued to play the madman inside his cell, and even more audaciously, continued to run the family affairs from behind bars, using his son Andrew as a courier to transport coded messages and orders to the other capos, keeping the Mafia machine running as if its leader were free. The story reached its dramatic climax in 2003. Investigators realized that imprisoning the body was not enough. They had to break the spirit and the mind. They prepared the knockout blow. A seasoned federal prosecutor entered Vincent's solitary confinement cell. He sat down calmly and tossed a massive file onto the cold metal table, reinforced with photos and audio recordings. Vincent looked at the prosecutor with vacant eyes and a slack jaw, clinging to the last threads of his play. But the prosecutor leaned in and spoke with a steely voice. "The game is over, Vincent. This file contains damning evidence convicting your son, Andrew, of leading a criminal organization and executing illegal orders under your direction. Now the choice is yours alone. Either you continue to feign madness, in which case we will try your son and he will receive a life sentence, dying behind bars just as you will. Or you admit right now to your full mental faculties, drop the mask, and take full responsibility. In exchange, we promise a plea deal for your son of no more than 5 years." A heavy silence fell over the cell, a silence carrying the weight of 30 years of lies and secrets. A violent struggle raged within the old man's mind, a war between the instinct for survival and pride versus the instinct of fatherhood and sacrifice. He looked at his son's photo in the file, then at the gray walls enclosing him. Suddenly, the transformation occurred that stopped the prosecutor's breath. Vincent's body stopped its artificial trembling. His back, bent for decades, straightened. The look of idiocy and vacancy was wiped from his eyes, replaced by a gaze that was sharp, intelligent, and terrifying. The gaze of the true Godfather. He reached out his hand steadily, took his pack of cigarettes, lit one, and blew the smoke slowly into the stunned prosecutor's face. Then he spoke in a deep, resonant voice, free of any stutter, while breaking the barrier of silence and insanity with a sentence for the ages. "You are the only person in 35 years who has seen the true face of Vincent Gigante. Yes, I am sane. Leave my boy alone." Vincent confessed to everything, destroying the legend of the madman he had built brick by brick to save his son from a dark fate. In 2006, within the walls of a federal prison, Vincent breathed his last after a battle with heart disease, leaving behind a stunned world, and the story of a man who proved that the most dangerous weapon in the world of crime is not the silenced pistol or the bulging muscle, but the human mind capable of deception and the force of will that allowed a man to wear the robes of madness to rule the sane, broken in the end only by the love of a father. And now, after hearing this tale, ask yourself, what was Vincent Gigante's true fatal mistake? Was it the deception that lasted decades? Was it the empire built on lies? Was it trusting the wrong people? Or was it believing he could control everything except fate itself? What would have happened if he had chosen a different path? If he had walked away when he still could? If power had not become a prison disguised as protection? Think about how one lie, even a brilliant one, can grow into a cage so large it traps the very man who built it. And ask yourself, in your own life, what illusions might be controlling you? And are you ready to break them before they break you? If you enjoyed this story and want more real, gripping true crime cases told with this level of depth and detail, make sure you follow the True Crime Dossier. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support helps bring more shocking real-life stories to light. The world is full of hidden truths, and on this channel, we uncover them one by one. إذا عندك أي جزء آخر فقط أرسله وسأكتبه كما هو.